morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where first I'd like to start off with a friendly reminder that you have until the end of the day tomorrow to get in your one-sentence reviews for American Sniper for the chance to win one of 3 Blu-ray copies of the film, courtesy of our friends at Dolby Atmos, who did the sound mixing for the movie. To reiterate the rules, you have to tweet me, at Grace Randolph, your one-sentence review of American Sniper, and you have to include in your tweet the hashtag Dolby Atmos. I'll pick the top 3 one-sentence reviews to get a copy of the Blu-ray, and I will announce those winners right here on Morning Movie News on Thursday morning. Now, Dolby Atmos technology, as we discussed yesterday, was not only used for American Sniper, but also for the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. And there are a few sounds coming out of Hollywood these days more iconic than the Mockingjay whistle. And so what we're going to talk about today for the first story is the poster that they released yesterday for the final, or at least final entry of this run of films, because we all know Lionsgate would like to do sequels and spin-offs for the franchise because they feel it's so lucrative, theme park, etc., etc. But still, the final film of this series, starring this cast, or this grouping, we'll see if anyone stays on, is still pretty darn iconic as well. And I actually had gotten a number of tweets from you recently, and just comments on YouTube videos asking when the ad campaign for this movie would begin in earnest. Now, don't forget that I'd say maybe actually a few months ago at this point, they had a fantastic motion poster that they released for the final film. And they had the Mockingjay going through the different, the symbol going through the different versions for each movie, and then at the end it exploded on fire. And during that entire motion poster, they highlighted, speaking of sound, wonderful lines from the film, and from all the films, getting us to the point for this final movie, again, in this series. It's hard to really speak about the finality of the Hunger Games when you don't believe that it's going to be the end. But anyway, it was powerful, powerful stuff. And then they had the Sisters poster, which they released, which we talked about for Cannes, with Katniss and Prim, and we talked about the lack of work the franchise has done, and many of you said this was a problem in the books as well, to really establish the relationship between Katniss and Prim, which of course is going to become very important in the final film, but since the filmmakers knew that, maybe Suzanne Collins didn't realize it until she wrote it at the end, so she didn't get to, sow the seed, so to speak, but the filmmakers knew, and unfortunately I think didn't do much to, I think much more has been done to set up the Peeta-Katniss relationship, and that's been set up quite well, but the Prim and Katniss relationship is wanting. So I'd be very curious to see how that emotional part of the final film will grab viewers. Now, this poster came out yesterday, and so again, this is what we're going to discuss in this story. And I think it's powerful to some degree, okay? But I think that one thing that really surprises me about it is that this franchise is just going to keep going in the very political, educational route, political discourse. And the reason that surprises me so much is because they had a little bit of a hiccup box office-wise with Mockingjay Part 1, right? Some people didn't like the movie. I loved the movie. I thought it was genius. And this franchise actually does inspire real-life revolution. So I'm glad they didn't back away from that to that point, right? I mean, if you're actually inspiring actual people to revolution, you don't want to be like, well, sorry, that doesn't sell movie tickets, so you're on your own. But I would think they would try and strive for a little bit more of a balance of like epic action, but yet also this kind of political discourse that makes the franchise so unique. I mean, how many young adult franchises, I think, discuss politics so well, and, the politics of revolution. So much of life is politics in every industry. I think everyone should get some very good lessons from the Hunger Games, no matter what they want to do with their life, even if it isn't lead a revolution into a dystopian future. Don't think these lessons don't apply to you. So I'm curious what you guys think. When you see this poster, are you like jazzed? Are you like, heck yeah, I can't wait to buy my ticket? I mean, I think to some degree people are going to buy tickets for this no matter what. I'm curious if they have to do any work to kind of convince people to come back with that hiccup with Mockingjay Part 1, or maybe people are like, you know what, I was a little disappointed in Mockingjay Part 1, but I know you saved all the action for Part 2, so don't worry about it, Francis Lawrence and company. We'll see. I also think what's very interesting is how much mileage Donald Sutherland has gotten out of this franchise. He joined it for the right reasons, that he wanted to encourage younger generations to embrace revolution and questioning the governing body that oversees them, something he feels that has been lost since when he was in his heyday as an actor in the 1970s, when that was going on everywhere. It was a mainstream situation. So he really wanted to see that inspired in a new a new generation, new voices to emerge, and he felt that the Hunger Games might be able to inspire that. And so that was very impressive that that's why he signed on for the franchise. And so I'm sure he's happy to see himself used in that way. But also, I do wonder, are more of you aware of Donald Sutherland now, or is he just like kind of like a figure for the Hunger Games films, and you don't really feel anything for him as an actor beyond that? I would be curious to see what this might do for his career going forward. He doesn't seem to be doing a lot. They shot Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 and 2 together, so he's pretty available to do stuff. So maybe he's semi-retired and just came out for this movie. But I think this is going to be, when people look back at the career of Donald Sutherland, I think this is going to be a big part of it. So kudos to him. And also it shows that it's never too late to reinvent yourself. And in Hollywood, you have to probably reinvent yourself multiple times. But again, I like that he did it for the right reasons. And they continue to be going with that. Maybe he's like, I'll only be in your poster if you make it like super revolutionary. And it even says in the bottom, Unite Revolution, for the hashtag Unite Revolution. And so I'm very curious, but I hope that they do play up the action parts of the final film, because I think they get a little too intellectual, a little too heady. They might end up tripping themselves big time with this final entry, this go around. And if they want this to be a long-time franchise, that's something they need to be keeping an eye on, right? They don't want to tie a bow on this if they want you to, unwrap more. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day has to do with The Rock, who wasted no time spending the capital he earned with his impressive debut with San Andreas. We talked about this on Movie Math late last night, that San Andreas overperformed by $20 million. That's pretty impressive. They expected in the low 30s. It came in the low 50s. And I gave a long list of things that could come from this, right? That he could finally get his Fast and Furious franchise officially greenlit, because right now they're just kicking around the idea of a Luke Hobbs movie. He can make more Journey movies, because it's the same director on San Andreas, in the same studio, Warner Brothers. They could fast-track Shazam even more so and put Brad Payton on it. There are a lot of things that The Rock could do with this capital, and I think it's interesting how he decided to spend it. Now, to his credit, this idea trended on Twitter for a little bit last night, so obviously he has an idea that at least initially captured people's attention. And this is The Rock's idea. He's going to remake Big Trouble in Little China, a cult classic starring Kurt Russell from, I believe, the 80s, and it's apparently a personal favorite of The Rock, so he's very excited to remake it. He will produce it as well as star, and interestingly, the coverage of this highlighted that he still makes movies with his ex-wife, Dani Garcia. If you ever see Dani Garcia credited anywhere, that's The Rock's ex-wife. They were married for a long time, they have a daughter together, but they recently divorced, I believe around 2011, I think. I was doing a lot of Rock research for San Andreas, but apparently they were able to overcome their differences, I guess because they have a child together, still a somewhat young child. She's like, I think, a young teen, or maybe an older teen, but still. And they're able to also still work together, which is very nice. Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston couldn't. She had to exit Plan B Entertainment, and Brad Pitt's really turned it into something impressive on his own, which I'm sure is kind of annoying to Jennifer Aniston. But anyway, so Dwayne Johnson and his ex-wife are continuing to work together, and they're going to produce this for Fox, and Fox is on quite a roll these days. And speaking of Fox, their X-Men First Class screenwriters, who also worked on Thor, are going to script here. Ashley Miller and Zach Stentz. And I don't know, that's not a huge vote of confidence in my opinion. It's not like you got Phil Lord and Chris Miller on this. I would try and maybe get somebody like a new voice. I think that Thor was okay. I liked Thor quite a bit, but Thor was like a pleasant surprise. And I didn't walk out of Thor being like, wow, that was well written. And I also think he'd be better off getting his screenwriter Carlton Cuse from San Andreas, because San Andreas had a nice, tight little script. Very, 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 very sexy script. So I'm curious if you guys think that this is a good idea. And I have mixed feelings about it, because first of all, from a business perspective, if it did trend on Twitter like that, there's audience interest, so that's encouraging. And I think people like The Rock a lot. I certainly do. And so it shows when he's in the right vehicle, people come out to see him. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Big Trouble in Little China, the synopsis, the plot synopsis for it is, the one-liner basically, is an all-American trucker gets dragged into a centuries-old mystical battle in San Francisco's Chinatown. Now, I think that recasting an all-American trucker now as The Rock is really great. I think he's a perfect fit with that role, and I think having him in a mystical battle is not a bad idea. But I think if you are familiar with the original Big Trouble in Little China, it skewed pretty young. It was kind of like this cult classic, but I think kids could watch it as well. I believe actually, like, I think my parents rented it for something. I like rented it for me, you know, when I was pretty little, and so I like there's this big swollen guy in it I recall very well. There's like a lot of like kiddie action style stuff. It's actually very Journey to the Center of the Earth-esque, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe The Rock's on the phone with Brad Payton right now being like, let's reteam again, come on and make Big Trouble in Little China with me. So my only concern is that this will skew kind of young, you know, it'll be more like a Spy Kids type film or a journey film. And I think The Rock really needs to move away from that. I think that he had his initial success with family films, which is maybe why he doesn't want to step away from it entirely, but I think The Rock needs to some degree grow up, right? I think he's very good as an action star. I think he can do comedy without it being all ages, and I think if he continues to straddle the two, the family market and like the straight action market, he's going to continue to dilute his persona, right? People are going to be like, I don't know who you are because you're more than one thing. And I think when it comes to being a major movie star, you need to really be specific and clear as to what you do. You can eventually run that road into the ground like Johnny Depp and then have to reinvent yourself, as we were just talking about with reinvention with Donald Sutherland. But I don't think that Dwayne Johnson has run this a more adult action persona into the ground yet. And I think he's actually keeping it from getting off the ground or hitting full speed, considering how you want to look at this metaphor, by continuing to have one foot in his past with family entertainment. So I'm curious, what do you think? Are you interested in Big Trouble in Little China with starring Dwayne Johnson, no matter how it is, you know, if it's adult or young skewing, or are you a little concerned as well? And then also, you know, Dwayne Johnson was in Furious 7 with Kurt Russell. I'm sure he can get that phone number from, I don't think they had any scenes together actually, but I'm sure he can get the number from Vin Diesel, and I'm sure Kurt Russell could have a little bit of a cameo there as well. All right, so for the third story of the day, you know, just yesterday we talked about Tron 3 falling apart, Tron 3 Ascension over at Disney, and now another high-profile project has fallen apart for a reason that's actually similar to some other recent news stories we've covered in Hollywood. So the big headline is that Sofia Coppola, actually it wasn't a big headline, it was more of a whisper, and it was that Sofia Coppola has exited Universal's The Little Mermaid over a casting argument. She really wanted to go with Maya Thurman-Hawke, which is Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke's daughter. And Universal was like, I don't see it. And she was like, well, if you don't cast her, I don't want to make this movie. And they're like, okay, bye. And so that's another woman walking off of a movie after Michelle MacLaren. And, you know, I think it's pretty disappointing. Now, first let's talk about, because like I said, I already kind of sowed the seeds for it, let's talk about how this echoes recent news stories. Well, this is another indie filmmaker refusing to play the studio game, right? We've had recently Edgar Wright, Cary Fukunaga, and now Sofia Coppola. And I think that it's a mistake for these people not to try and move up to the bigger league, because they can always go back and do what they once did. But I think it's important, I talked about never resting on your laurels, pushing yourself, trying new things, and I really feel that Sofia Coppola could have done something special here. Although, apparently not, because if I were Universal, I'd be like, this seems a lot, very much like the films you used to make, right? And how am I going to compete with the more energetic, like Disney live-action fairy tales and what Warner Brothers is doing, if you're going to go make some more ethereal, you know, junk? You know, with all due respect, Sofia Coppola, I don't need ethereal, you know, The Little Mermaid. I wanted hints of that, which is why I hired you, but I need something that's very mainstream and commercial and upbeat. But if you just make some kind of like, oh, I'm adrift, literally in the sea, stuff with another, you know, ingenue. Like, I mean, like Maya Thurman-Hawke is very similar to the typical Sofia Coppola leading lady, right? Kirsten Dunst, Emma Watson. Although I think, you know, with Emma Watson, that was a good, refreshing change of pace for Emma Watson. Although nobody saw the bling ring. You know, she's worked with that kind of, you know, actress so many times. So I think that it just seems not high concept enough. It doesn't seem big enough. Again, especially when you have to compete with the really exciting movies that, like Emma Watson, for instance, in Beauty and the Beast. That's a very powerful casting choice with Emma Watson for Beauty and the Beast. But with this completely unknown actress who's pretty young as well, Maya Thurman-Hawke, she seems a little bit too young for the Little Mermaid role, I think, considering they've been going with people in their mid-20s. I think this actress is like maybe still in her teens. It's just going to open up a whole bag of problems and not, I think, be able to compete at the same level as the other films. So I agree with Universal yet again. This is similar to our Cary Fukunaga versus New Line discussion on Stephen King's It that he wanted to remake and ended up walking away from over, that was, in that case, it was a budgetary argument. But still, you know, filmmaking, I know some people say, oh, it's by committee, and that's negative. But filmmaking is a team business, especially when you're given hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least even tens of millions of dollars to spend. There's a lot on the line. The company's on the line. You're sowing seeds for other people's movies. It's a very symbiotic relationship, and you can't really kind of pull this garbage. So that's the third story of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from Juan Nunez, a.k.a. Exalazi. And Juan says, "Hi, Grace, question. The news of Lumberjanes getting a movie at Fox sparked a question in me. Why do so few in the independent comic franchises that get development deals for TV and movies get stuck in development hell? For example, the sixth, I think that this question was phrased incorrectly. It's why do so many of the independent comic book franchises that get development deals in TV and movies get stuck in development hell? For example, The Sixth Gun from Oni Press got into the pilot stage but was never picked up. From Carlton Cuse, by the way, who wrote the San Andreas script. This might help that maybe. San Andreas, several attempts have been made to produce a Y the Last Man movie or TV series. True from Image Comics is another series with several failed attempts. Queen and Country, 100 Bullets, Fables, etc. The list goes on and on. It does, Juan, it does. It seems like if your name isn't Robert Kirkman or Mark Miller, you don't get your movie or TV show made. In theory, I would think that comics would have an advantage in the development process because creators can show a tangible example of their idea working. Producers can see what it's supposed to look like and how the story plays out. And yet, this doesn't seem to be the case in practice. What do you attribute this to? Thank you, and here's all the smileys in the world for you. Smiley, 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 smiley. Thank you, Juan. Love the smileys. And I think this is a really good question. But I think you kind of answered it yourself, because you said, I would think that comics would have an advantage because they have a tangible example of their idea working. They do not! They do not have a tangible example of their idea working, and therein lies the problem. While there's a physical comic which tells a story, and where a Hollywood suit or some talent involved can say, oh, I like that, these comics usually aren't huge sellers, right? I mean, they're able to keep going, but they don't have these huge fan bases. So a creator can't say, oh, these people are super excited about... I mean, the Lumberjanes is a different situation, because that trended. Very few of the other projects you mentioned ever trended, but Lumberjanes did. So they have a little bit of a fan base to contend with there, which is going to be, I think, very interesting to see how that plays out, because I don't know if Fox is aware of that, because they put a male writer on it right off the bat. So I think that there might be a disconnect between how the studio views the property and how the property is viewed by its fans, that, again, I don't think Fox knows really exist. But anyway, when you're talking about these independent comics that have very low sales numbers, Hollywood goes, okay, well, I kind of like your idea. You have a gem of an idea here which has attracted some attention. I mean, for instance, Saga, I think, is one of the few really well-selling independent comics. And Y the Last Man was back in its day. But I think it's a little problematic with all the adult themes in that show. And also, there are egos always involved. There's a lot of politicking as well going on behind the scenes in this kind of a situation. But anyway, with these other projects you're talking about, Juan, you have a project that they go, well, look, you didn't get a huge number of people to read your property, right? So clearly the Hollywood suit goes, you need my help. I'm going to come in here and fix it. Like, I like A, D, and G, but I don't like B, F, and Y. So I'm going to take that out and I'm going to add my own stuff in. And that's so often why when these properties do get to the big screen, or the small screen, if ever, they very much do not mirror what you originally saw. For instance, iZombie is a recent comic book that's been adapted to the CW. It did make it, but a lot of fans of the comic have said there are a lot of changes, and you actually ripped off another series of novels, and why don't you just buy that property, right? Why did you option the comic? And the reason is because CW has a very strong relationship, well, it's co-owned by Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers owns DC, and so it's a very easy purchase for them because iZombie was a Vertigo title. So again, it's politics, it's what business you're in, what your connections are, who you have access to. So I think that that's the issue at heart, though. There just aren't enough strong sales numbers to really drive. And even with the big guns, they make changes all the time to the comic book canon stories with Batman and Superman and the X-Men and Captain America, etc. And you're like, why? Why would you do that? People have beloved this for years, decades. And Hollywood will always come back, I think, and they have a real unfortunate angle here that I think is a good argument. And they'll go, comic book readership numbers don't pale in comparison. They don't compare to comic book movie viewership. So we have to do what's best for the movie because a lot of the people seeing that movie have no idea what happened in the comics. So we're going to go and do what we need to do. And I think it's a really insulting way to look at the comic book creators because it's like saying your ideas don't hold water with the mainstream, right? It's like, hey, that mainstream audience just wasn't exposed to these great stories, and now you have the opportunity to do that. It's a mixed bag. I do complain about just straight adapting comic book stories to different mediums because I feel that that keeps people from reading the original comic book stories. So I wish they would tell new stories, but that were based on the comic book lore, right? It's like just make new stories in continuity, I guess is what I would say. But as to your question, Juan, that's my answer. I think there just isn't enough pull sales-wise to really give these creators and their publishers, unfortunately, the pull that they need to ram these projects through. And often they're very fringe, and I think Hollywood struggles with how to adapt them. And also there are budgetary issues, for instance, with Fables. Fables is not dead, though. I believe last I heard David Heyman from the Harry Potter films is thinking of producing a movie series on Fables still. But that's a fairy tale movie franchise that's extremely adult, as anyone who's read the comic knows, and that's a major hurdle for Hollywood, as always, because they want that PG-13 rating. Although R-rated movies are doing a little bit better, for instance, Kingsman: The Secret Service and hopefully Mad Max. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.